look at it. I can see why it's been given a little bit, but I don't think it is a penalty, and it's one that's left a sour taste in Villa fans' mouths.
Long term, I find it quite sad to think of a time when Tyrone Mings isn't at Aston Villa, and because he feels very much a part of the furniture now, and I think he really understands the fabric of the club, doesn't he? I think he gets the supporters. Supporters have a mixed opinion of his playing ability, I think, but I think universally he's really well liked. If I was the Villa team, I'd fancy playing Arsenal more than I'd fancy playing Man City at this point. Yeah.
The 1874 Show by the Villa View.
1874 Show with Dan Bardell and Gregg Evans. If you are watching on YouTube, it's pretty apparent that it's the 1874 Show because it is the biggest logo that you can get on YouTube. Greg, you're fresh from getting back from Manchester. You were at the game yesterday in the press boxes ever. Disastrous first half for Aston Villa Football Club, really. But to be fair, shoots of recovery in the second half and at least ended on a positive. But you cannot play any team in the manner that Villa did in the first half, at least not the reigning champions.
Yeah, long day actually, Dan. I forgot what away days were like because
you've been on a permanent away day in Thailand.
Yeah.
You have.
Yeah, exactly. So no, first one back for me for a while. Did feel like a long day. It was about 15-16 hour shift, and not usually like that when it's so close. But anyway, another disappointing day for Villa. I always seem to pick the bad ones whenever I'm at the games. They always lose. Maybe
there's a lot of bad ones over the years, Greg. There's a lot of bad ones over the years, to be fair, that you could have gone to. But yeah, that is the first away defeat for a while.
Yeah, I missed the three victories. It's quite annoying. I love writing about victories. I hate writing about defeats, but I've got used to it over the years. So yeah, I thought it was really poor the first half. You know, the worst I've seen Villa for a long time, and in a year where it's been a little bit harder for Man City to pick up results, they probably had their easiest 45 minutes of the season as well. So I think it was a combination of everything. You know, the fans were right behind them because of the week that they'd had. The players were really up for it, and it was a really fun Manchester City lineup, wasn't it? I mean, you know, I liked the fact that they didn't play with the left back; they played with the three centre halves. They used Bernardo Silva as an additional midfielder, and when you've got five quality midfielders like that, it's always going to be tough. And Villa found it really hard.
Yeah, I looked at that team. Their team won before the game. And then I saw the Villa team as well. And my confidence severely dropped at the moment. Those teams dropped at 3:30 p.m. And like you say, I think in some ways Villa were on for a hiding to nothing, because I do think whoever Manchester City have been playing yesterday, they may have probably got a result just because by virtue of what's happened in the last week, a reaction to the Spurs game. De Bruyne comes back in the side. I think he had a point to prove after being left out the game prior as well. So I did feel like this is going to be a difficult day anyway. But then Villa just have this habit sometimes of making life more difficult for themselves. And really, that was what put Manchester City ahead and gave them control of that game in the first half, was the fact that Villa just really didn't do anything that well defensively and just gifted the game to them. A follow-on from the Leicester game, if you like, as well.
It was really poor, wasn't it? Because you think of how bad the 90 minutes was against Leicester, and then the first 45 minutes against Manchester City. So you combine the two together, and we were saying, surely Villa can't make that many mistakes in a game again as they did in the Leicester game. But they took that into the first half against Man City. They were really poor, more individual mistakes. First goal was poor, second goal was horrendous, third goal was, the penalty. So unfortunate in some ways, but, a penalty. So just a really difficult day, a really difficult first half. And we forget that Emi Martinez made two brilliant saves as well. So if Villa were 5-0 down at the break, it wouldn't have been unjust.
No, and that first goal, the corner. I mean, Villa actually, to their credit, had a great first minute, because we went on the attack, and Leon Bailey fluffed his lines a little bit. Didn't probably make the most of that opportunity, but it was a positive start. And you thought, okay, there might be some space here for Villa to operate in. They might be able to take advantage of Manchester City's high line. But I imagine you've planned all week to keep it tight, keep the score down, keeping it 0-0 for as long as possible, and try and plan the break. The last thing you want to do is concede off that first set piece. Now, you'll probably know more than me. There was a lot of stuff popping up on the Sky Sports screen about Villa being one of the worst teams conceding from set pieces. I think only Bournemouth had conceded more than Villa prior to the game. But I would say I think that all came under the previous regime. I don't think any of that had come under Unai Emery. So it hadn't really been a problem under Unai Emery so far. But the first corner against Manchester City, and it's that man again, Rodri, who just always seems to score against Villa. That's 4 or 5 goals now he scored against Villa since he arrived in Manchester and played for Manchester City. The alarming thing for me is just that there's a severe lack of physicality in that Villa side without Tyrone Mings. And when you look at that corner coming in, you see who's marking all the Manchester City giants. You kind of feel like there's always going to be a problem, and physicality just feels like something that Villa have neglected over their whole return to the Premier League.
Yeah, I think it was disappointing from Boubacar Kamara again, wasn't it? It felt like Rodri was his man, and he just lost that runner. I don't know the specific instructions that are asked of them from defending set pieces. Maybe we can try and go into a bit more detail with that with Unai Emery at his next press conference, or if it continues to be a theme, as you say. Dan, I don't think it's been much of a problem really in previous games. But look, clearly they got this one wrong. They left Rodri. He ran around the defence and got almost a free header because Kamara was nowhere near him in the end. And yeah, I think Villa are a weaker defensive unit when Tyrone Mings isn't playing. I think he wins a lot of first contacts from corners, so that's what makes him a really useful player in that back line. And they missed him a little bit yesterday. I feel like we're always getting onto Callum Chambers because every time he seems to play, he makes a mistake, doesn't he? But if you take that mistake out, maybe I'm being a little bit too kind to him, but I thought his second half was a little bit better. But then he wasn't up against Haaland, was it, on that half? So it was a tough day for Chambers. It's hard to come in when you haven't played too many games and then go to the Etihad and
yeah, it's terrible.
Best. But the header was ugly, wasn't it? For that second goal, really ugly. So yeah, bit of work for Villa to do defensively, I think.
I mean, we're going to come on to Tyrone Mings later on in the show, but I just feel like one centre half being out shouldn't be that critical to what you do defensively. It's almost like Chambers is, you probably say, it's Conser's backup because I feel like they're similar types of defenders, aren't they? Yeah.
If you're looking at it, he's the fourth choice centre half in a mid-table Premier League team.
He's probably fit. I would probably say he's fit for purpose for that role. I don't think Villa are going to get better than that as a fourth choice centre half for where they are. But I think where the problem lies is he's not a similar type of defender to Tyrone Mings, and Conser's not really the same as Tyrone Mings either. They kind of tend to complement more each other. Diego Carlos being out since the start of the season is an absolute disaster because you feel like he might have been that physical presence for when Mings doesn't play. So when Mings isn't there at the moment, not that we're blessed with loads of bodies in defence anyway, there isn't that big commanding centre half to come in. And Manchester City are good at a lot of things, but they're very good on the physical side of the games as well. They've got a lot of 6 foot plus players in that team. So as I say, you were watching that ball come in, and you just knew there was danger. You knew there was trouble. Unless it's into an area where Emi Martinez is going to come and get it, you think that team's going to struggle to clear the lines because there's just no size in it whatsoever. And I just think that's a really unusual situation for a Premier League team to be in, that you take one player out and there's literally no physical presence. There's no big man in that team without that one player. I can't think of another team that has got that problem.
It's difficult, isn't it? Because they've lost 50% of the centre backs, and they've literally lost half of the back line in Carlos and Mings. So it's not just taking Mings out of the equation; it's taking Carlos and Mings out of the equation, isn't it? I agree. I think Villa are slightly, a slightly small group when you look at it. Ashley Young at fullback, Luca Digne, he's quite slight, isn't he? Not necessarily short. Maybe Matt Cash has a bit more of a physical presence to him when he plays, But yeah, they've lost 2 centre halves, so you've got to look at it. It's easier to build a squad with 4 really good centre backs if you're playing European football, because you can swap them every week. You're in the cup competitions, you're playing regularly in the Carabao Cup, the FA Cup, or the Europa League or the Champions League. So when you're signing players, you can say to them, well, you're going to play 20 games this season, minimum. You might be playing 40, and you can attract much better quality players. Whereas for Villa, they're not competing in Europe, so they probably need 3 really good centre halves, and maybe they have that in Carlos, Mings, and Konza. But your 4th and perhaps even 5th choice, it's going to be really difficult to convince them to come. if they're already at a certain level, because they're obviously going to want to play. So in Callum Chambers, as you say, I think that's probably as good as Villa are going to get. Somebody who's experienced, he's played in the Premier League. He's made a lot of appearances over the years. Yes, he's made a few mistakes, but the other option is trying one of the young lads. And Villa had Sil Swinkles on the bench, a 19-year-old who they signed just before the Brexit rules, and that's the alternative. So that's where you're at, unfortunately, when you lose to your best.
Yeah, and the second goal from Chambers, look, it's a mistake. I'm not going to dress it up any other way. It was almost that the thought of Haaland and just the thought of him being there made Callum Chambers a little bit indecisive. And when you're indecisive at the highest level and you make a mistake like you did, you're probably going to get punished. And in his defence, I think there was time for Villa to recover it, but they just didn't. And the ball's come across the goal, and Gundogan's ended up knocking it in a little bit like he did last season in the Manchester City game away from home. But you're then 2-0 down, and you feel at that point there's no way back for Villa. You've let in two really sloppy, poor goals, and it's a long way back, and it's already a bad day at the office.
Well, yeah, I mean, you look at the last game of last season, Villa were 2-0 up, and there probably wasn't one Villa supporter in the stadium confident that Villa were going to go and run out winners. So when you're 2-0 down against Man City, it's over, isn't it? There is just no way back. I do think the second, I know we'll get onto it, but I do think the second half performance was a little bit better. I feel like that Emery tried to make the changes that he could. He brought the 5 players on, the 5 senior players that he had on the bench, and tried to make things different. Okay, City sat off a little bit. They took off Haaland and rested him. They took off Grealish and rested him. So it became a little bit easier. And clearly they weren't as fired up to go and get the goals in the second half.
Job was done, wasn't it?
First half. It was over, wasn't it? It's typical City. They can relax and think of the game on Wednesday against Arsenal. But it was a bit more positive from Villa at least. But yeah, you just can't be ever performing that badly in a period of 35 to 45 minutes against any of the top 6 teams, because they're all going to punish you.
Yeah, and we saw it last week against Leicester, who are probably a bottom 6 side at the moment as well. If you make mistakes, teams in the Premier League will punish you, and it was a little bit of a follow-on in that way, which was that was a little bit disappointing, because we hoped that the Leicester game was a bit of an anomaly in terms of the making mistakes. I expected to lose to Manchester City. It was not a surprise one bit. The score 3-1 actually was the score I predicted on other podcasts, Premier League podcasts that I do. But it's sometimes the manner in which Villa lose games, and you're 2-0 down, 2 bad goals. The last thing you need is a penalty going against you as well, and that's exactly what happened. I mean, probably been waiting for Grealish to have a sustained game against us, because it hasn't really happened. He didn't even come on in that game last season, did he? So we've been waiting for him to have an impact at some point, and he did. He's on good form for Manchester City at the moment. He's been one of their better players through this stodgy run that they've had. I don't think it's a penalty. I also don't. You're gonna hate me saying this, because you used to hate me saying stuff like this. I also don't think it gets given if Jack Grealish is playing for Villa against Manchester City. I can't believe that VAR didn't look at it. I can see why it's been given a little bit, but I don't think it is a penalty, and it's one that's left a sour taste in Villa fans' mouth.
I think it gets given if he's playing for Villa.
I thought you would disagree with me.
We haven't missed this, have we?
No.
I mean, look, Villa fans surely know that they've watched Jack Grealish for so many years. This is the style that he plays. He's won a lot of fouls for Villa in a similar way over the years, and has been very beneficial in the games, the playoff games when Aston Villa got promoted. Jack Grealish's style of play has helped Aston Villa out of the Championship, and then establish themselves as a Premier League club. So I don't see why there's any surprise in the way he plays and the way he performs. I thought he was excellent yesterday. I thought take away the penalty, because obviously Villa fans are going to be thinking, well, as he's fully played for that, but that's within his right, isn't it? That's how he won so many fouls for Villa in the past. His performance alone, I thought he was excellent. I thought was really looking forward to seeing him play, actually, because He hadn't started the 3 previous games against Villa. I think he'd only played something like 6 or 7 minutes against Villa. So was looking forward to seeing how he played. And yeah, I thought he was excellent. He gave probably Ashley Young the toughest time that he's had this season, and was unlucky not to score, wasn't he? It was a good save for Martinez.
Yeah, I think. Look, I think the reaction to it from Villa fans is over the top. If I'm being honest, there's always going to be hurt around Grealish because of how much he was loved and how much people would have wanted him to stay. I don't think there's a player that was as universally liked by this fan base ever in my time supporting the club. Every player, there'll be some that don't rate them, and everyone rated Jack Grealish. Everyone loved Jack Grealish. At the end of the day, he's doing a job. He plays for Manchester City now. His job as a professional is to go out and do his best and try and win the game for his team, for Manchester City. They're his team now. And that's what he's done. But I just don't think it's a penalty, because I think there is a little bit of contact, but it isn't that contact that knocks him down with Ramsey. It's a very brief tangle of legs. It isn't that knocks him down. He trips himself up, and that's the bit that knocks him down and knocks him to the floor. I just find it bizarre that VAR don't even look at it. And as soon as the ref gives it, even if they did look at it, to be honest, they're going to give that penalty, because they're not going to say it's a clear and obvious error. So I just think it wasn't a penalty, and I completely take your point of, well, you used to do that all the time for us, and we never used to complain about it. Completely take your point. I don't remember us ever getting penalties for it. We got a hell of a lot of free kicks from it, but I can't remember us ever really getting penalties from this situation. But in all honesty, if that had been the first goal, I'd have probably been a lot more upset by it. But it's the third goal. We've not been very good anyway. It's kind of sealed a game that was already sealed, if that makes sense. And I don't dwell on it too much, because we did it last night on the post match point. But I knew me and you wouldn't agree whether it was a penalty or not. Let's move. Let's not move away from the game, because there was a second half as well. And like you said, Villa, there's a few positives in that second half. First positive, I think all 5 subs that came on gave the manager something to think about for next week. And when we're talking about this time when Villa don't have a massive squad, there still is effective Premier League players to bring off the bench. And I thought Duran as well. I think that's 2 decent cameos from him now, and he was very unfortunate not to score.
Yeah, I thought he offered a little bit more than Leon Bailey when he came on. I'm very unlucky with that shot against the crossbar. That would give him some confidence, wouldn't it? Yeah,
he doesn't look like he's lacking confidence, in all honesty, from what I've seen.
No, I think you're right. I don't think he does. I think it would have just given him that extra boost, to believe that he can go and do it in this league, and that, that a start might be a little bit closer rather than just coming off the bench. Unai Emery's been asked about him in almost every press conference, and he sounds a little bit excited by him, but he keeps reiterating the same message. I need to work with him tactically. So it'd be interesting to know exactly what he wants from him that he's perhaps not seen or doesn't think he can get at this point. I hope he doesn't suck too much of his free spirit out of him, because he's clearly got that. But look, I think we have to back Emery as an elite coach to go and get the best out of him. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see how he develops. Yeah, because I think he's had a couple of bright appearances now. Probably not quite ready for a start, you wouldn't think. But then
could be a useful impact.
Bailey doing enough? Yeah, he's Bailey doing enough to suggest that he should continue starting. Let's in terms of the other substitutes that came on, John McGinn, I thought put himself about. Was very surprised that he didn't start. I thought that would have been ideal for him. That would have been the perfect start for him. Perhaps pull off one of the more attacking players and put him in the middle. It might have helped tighten things up. Certainly with Man City playing 5 in midfield. Although Emery wouldn't have known that before. And something I also found out about Emery, he played against Guardiola 13 times and had never won.
Yeah.
Which I mean, I know it's always going to be difficult because of the level of team that Guardiola manages, but that must be frustrating him for sure.
That's 9 defeats now, isn't it? For Emery against Pep.
4,
it will be now. 4 draws.
4 draws.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah. So, yeah, disappointing for him. And look, Emery loves being back in the Premier League. He wants to pit himself against the real best coaches in the division. That's what really fires him up. It was difficult for him to leave Villarreal after taking them into the Champions League semi-final. Okay, the next season wasn't going exactly to plan, but it was Villa's project that they sold him. Come here, we've got grand plans, big ambitious owners who are willing to fund the years ahead. But Emery came back with a personal mission of his own to rebuild his reputation, after the miserable end at Arsenal. So days like yesterday were ones that he was really looking forward to sort of to show that he's still this elite manager and for people in England to recognise him. So he was a little bit downbeat after the game, very, very, a little bit shorter with his answers. So yeah, I think he was feeling it a bit.
Do you think he got anything wrong per se yesterday? Because we talk about the defence. He didn't really have choice. Could Moreno have played again? Because I'm just Luca Dean at the moment isn't offering anything either way for Villa at the moment for me, going forwards or going backwards.
Yeah, I'm not sure purely because I haven't seen him enough whether Moreno can be any better defensively than Luca Dean at the moment.
I just think at least he offers something going forwards, which Luca Dean isn't doing anything for Villa going forwards at the moment. Moreno looks alive while coming forward to me, even in that Leicester cameo for his second half. He offered something. He was popping up high up the pitch. He was always an outlet.
Both times, isn't it? I mean, but both times Villa are chasing the game, or they're down and they have to go in attacker. So it'd be interesting to see what it'd be like from the start again. He's only had one start, hasn't he? The Leeds game. The Southampton game. Yeah. He came off the bench against Leeds early on, but I mean that's something that it's a bit of a dilemma, isn't it, for Emery now, who he plays in either position. At the left back position. But yeah, I think he gave it a go, didn't he? He brought all the 5 senior players off the bench and tried to change it. Just didn't quite work.
Yeah, you mentioned Bailey. I thought he's so up and down, but at the moment it's more down than up. Unfortunately, there isn't any level of consistency to his game at all. And there's a player there you've actually been writing about Leon Bailey and Buendia and actually inadvertently Danny Ings as well, the 3 that were brought in to replace Jack Grealish in your piece that's gone out on The Athletic this morning. I feel I haven't got much bang for their buck really with those signings, and they need a little bit more from Buendia and Bailey for the amount they paid for them really now.
Yeah. It was pointed out to me by quite a few fans in the comments section and on Twitter today that Buendia was actually signed before Grealish came, which
they knew what was coming.
Of course, I do know, but Grealish was always leaving that summer, and I think it can be widely accepted. When we're talking about the Grealish sale, the £100 million, the money was used to buy Danny Ings, Emi Buendia and Leon Bailey.
Christian Perslow himself said the 3 players, but we've replaced Grealish with 3 players in the interview he did for Villa TV. Exactly. So, the chief exec said it.
Exactly. So look, we're talking a bit widely about it. So I think, okay, Danny Ings didn't quite work. We'll take him first. I think Villa got a very good deal selling him on for potentially £15 million. To take a £10 million hit on a 31-year-old who had scored, I think, 14 goals in nearly 50 appearances. So he did play a part in helping Villa establish themselves as a Premier League club still. And look, it was the second and third and fourth season. That he joined.
I think this is our 4th season, isn't it now? So it was his 3rd season he joined.
3rd and 4th season, yeah. So look, there's still a threat of relegation as ambitious as Villa are. First and foremost, they need to survive, and Danny Ings' goals did help in that respect. So I think Villa were quite happy with the deal that they got for that. So look, £15 million that they'll probably get from West Ham if they survive this season, £12 million if they go down. That money will be put towards a new striker, and Villa will get a new striker in the summer. The key is now trying to find whether Bailey and Buendia can be really consistent performers for Emery. The issue with Bailey is Villa use him so often. He's the player that they look for a change of pace, for an attacking spark. He's the one that dribbles the most, the most progressive carries in any of the team. In the team. He receives the most progressive passes. So if that player that is so heavily used and relied upon is not performing, then the attacking element of the team are going to fall down. I think his cold hard statistics are not too bad. He scored 4 goals and set up 2 others. So you can compare him to some of the other wingers in the Premier League, the likes of Anthony Gordon, Jadon Sancho, maybe not a great example because he struggled. Damari Gray, Said Ben Rama, Raheem Sterling had a little bit of an indifferent start before his injury to his time at Chelsea. Wingers typically blow hot and cold, and Bailey's numbers aren't that bad. I think the issue is we're just not seeing him play very well, are we, very often? He's not having a consistent run of games. And you could probably name the genuinely eye-catching games that he's had on one hand, couldn't you?
But I'm struggling to even. I can think about games where he's impacted and he scored a goal. The Leeds game, I think he was good against Leeds at Villa Park. He scored and he was involved in the second goal. So that's a good performance.
Yeah.
But like you say, you're right. It is just one hand. But I can think of good moments rather than good games, and that's starting to concern me a little bit with him now. Is that he is the outlet? He's someone that Villa look for, and sometimes he gets the ball. And his touch will be terrible, or he'll make a great first touch, and you think, here we go. And then his second touch is absolutely woeful. He'll run into the defender and just offer nothing. And I think Villa are at the point now where you could kind of, last season he was in and out of the team. So you would think, well, he'd have and he had injuries. There's no real run there to get anything going. But we're now seeing those same kind of performances when he's playing every week. And I think when you're playing every week, the excuses kind of run out for you a little bit. And Villa aren't the same terrible outfit they were under Gerrard either. There is signs of promise going forwards now. They've scored in every game, I think, since Emery's come in as well. So Villa are a productive side now under Emery, whereas they just didn't look like they knew where the goal was under Steven Gerrard. So that's starting to concern me now because he is playing every week and we don't look terrible going forward. Yet I'm still seeing a lot more games where he doesn't influence the game at all than I am good games.
I mean, it would be pleasing for him that he's now recorded more. I think he's doubled the amount of minutes that he
must have
played last season in this season already, and there's still
he will have done
odd games to go. So, I mean, that'll be good for him on a personal note. And look, you want your players fit, and you don't want to be giving them those excuses. But yeah, I think that you look at it yesterday, and it was just. He intercepted that pass from Kyle Walker, didn't he? He had a lovely, great chance to go and do something creative, and then Ruben Diaz, I think it was just sort of crunched through him and won the ball off him with ease, really. And you just think those are the moments where Villa really need their best players to be making an impact. And it's only one moment, but when you play City, those moments are few and far between. So yeah, I think there's a bit of work to do still with the forward line. We know they're going to address it in the summer, but it would be useful to try and get a bit more out of Bailey and Buendia in these final few weeks.
Yeah, I'm just looking back now over previous transfer windows and stuff, and forward players that Villa have bought since they've returned to the Premier League. I can only really think of Ollie Watkins, who you would say was a success. And some Villa fans would ask questions of him, which I would completely disagree with. But he's the only person I can think that Villa have signed as a forward player since they've returned to the Premier League that has been a success.
I think a real success. Yeah, Watkins. I mean, you can.
Who would be next? Who would be next?
Look, you can say El Ghazi scored a fair few important goals.
I suppose I wasn't counting him, I suppose, because he was already with them in the Championship. I'd agree with that.
Very
good
important goals.
Yeah.
To a lesser extent, Trezeguet scored some really important goals as well. But look, we all know if we're saying Trezeguet is, this all-action brilliant player.
If that's our top three, well, there has been some problems.
Then we're lying a little bit, aren't we? But he did score important goals, so you do need to get contributions from your players, and he did. I think Bertrand Traore had some moments as well, didn't he, in his first season? And has still got a chance.
Say he's a qualified success, though, would you? I guess
not a major success. No. But look, he helped the club establish themselves in the Premier League, so that's still important. Scored important goals, had a few good moments. Coutinho hasn't quite worked, although I think he's come off the bench and looked decent in the last couple.
He'll
of weeks.
Start next week, I think.
Yeah, we're back to the old Cam Buendia and Coutinho start again together.
I think they will next week
against Arsenal.
I think Bailey will come out for Coutinho. That's my personal opinion of what I think might happen.
Interesting. I mean, we'll have to see. But yeah, I mean, you look back at the other signings: Wesley, Samatta, Borja Baston. It needs must at those times, but yeah, it hasn't been great for Villa up front. They could do with making sure they get their next ones right.
Yeah, the next one's pivotal actually for them, because that's a hell of a lot of players they've bought in not to be successful as front players. I mean, Villa have been very hit and miss with transfers anyway since they returned to the Premier League. I think that first window, there was always going to be a little bit of a case of that happening when you sign so many players. There's absolutely no way that they're all going to be great. But I'm just disappointed they haven't built on that one summer transfer window where I felt it was a good window. Got Martinez, Cash and Watkins, who were all good signings. they've not built on that since, and that's the disappointing thing, because they have just thrown money at the wall really and not got a lot in return for that. It's still time for Traore. I guess he might come in the second half of the season and make some form of impact for us, but at the moment, questions are starting to be asked with recruitment now. There hasn't been a successful forward player since Watkins, and that's a fair while ago now.
Yeah, I mean, look, the recruitment department in general, I think has got some. I think has got some of the signings right and some of them wrong. And look, I think in football, if you get 50, 60%, typically that's what that club say. If you can get 50 or 60% right, then you're doing okay. If you can get slightly higher than that, then you're doing exceptionally well. There was a time for a long period where Liverpool got pretty much everything right, wasn't it? And they were the club that everybody was looking at and basing themselves on. Hasn't quite gone to plan for them in more recent windows. So these things happen. Arsenal had a period where they kept getting players wrong, didn't they? If you remember, they spent so much on Nicolas Pepe, just as one example. If we're still sticking at wingers and wide players, seem to have got a little bit better in more recent years. So it's just ups and downs, and the difficulty with Villa is they've chopped and changed managers quite often in more recent years. When they got rid of Dean Smith, I mean, look, Dean Smith wanted to play two strikers, so that's one of the reasons that why Danny Ings came, and he wanted a partner for Ollie Watkins. Unfortunately, it just didn't quite work out, did it? But it was worth giving it a go. And when you look at Ings' history, I don't think any Villa fan really thought, oh no, this is a bit of a gamble.
No, I was happy with it. So, Villa fans had wanted an alternative striker, and that's what they got.
Exactly. So it's like, if the entire fan base was happy when Danny Ings was arriving, then that's the reason why the recruitment team have sort of selected him, because it's a pretty safe option. And if things happen after that, really out of the club's control. But when Gerrard came, obviously he wanted his players. Coutinho was a player that was solely signed for the manager, and that's going to be the same with Emery now. He's going to want his own striker at some point. So these are the things that happen when managers come and go. But yeah, I think, look, Villa need to probably learn from some of their mistakes and just make sure they get it right.
I think I'd almost forgive it a little bit more if I felt like there was an overarching strategy with Villa, transfer strategy. I don't know what Villa's transfer strategy is. I mean, Brighton, it's very defined, isn't it? I know they're a bit of an anomaly. Brighton, it's very defined what they do. You know what they do, and even what Newcastle have done since their ownership's changed. Arsenal, you mentioned them. That their recent transfers have been a success. It's because there's a defined identity of player that they're looking at. I still don't really know what Villa's identity is. It just feels like a mix where at one point we were signing players who were under the age of 27 and trying to get them to build up. We signed a couple of players, obviously, from the Championship who I think have improved and gone up in value. I think Martinez has obviously gone up in value. But more recently, it seems a bit of a mishmash. But I suppose, like you say, I guess maybe that does come when you've had three different managers in the space of 18 months.
Yeah, it's appeasing managers, isn't it? Managers want certain players or certain positions filled. I think the two real club signings that have been made in recent windows are Kamara and Duran. So if you're looking at a little bit of a model from what the club are trying to do away from a manager, then those are two real key ones, because they've spent a lot of time on trying to get both of them in. Had multiple clubs also competing to sign them, but have done really well to actually get them in on pretty good deals as well. So, but you just know that the next window it's going to be very heavily led by Unai Emery.
Which, I'm fine with, because I want Unai Emery to have the tools at his disposal and the players that he wants, because I think he's a great coup for Villa and a great pickup for Villa from a manager. Really, I don't think we had any right to go and get someone of his quality off the back of what we'd done under Gerrard and where we were sat in the league. Bearing in mind, Emery turned down Newcastle 12 months before as well. I think that's a brilliant managerial pickup from the board. So fair play to them. I say they've got a lot wrong over the last 12 to 18 months. They've got a few things right as well, and I don't dispute that. Got Douglas Luiz tied up to a new contract as well, which is a positive, because I think he's an effective player for Villa and a good operator in midfield for Villa now. But I want to talk to you about Tyrone Mings' contract situation. We saw the impact at the club when he doesn't play in a game yesterday against Manchester City. He's now got around 16 months left on his contract, Tyrone Mings. there any inkling with what's going on there? Because that would be one I'd be wanting the club to look at, me personally, because everyone knows how highly I think of him. Is it one that you think will get sorted out? What do you think's going on there?
First of all, shall I put my light on? 'Cause it's getting a bit dark
Yeah, you
outside.
probably should, Greg. He's getting a bit dark. You
Okay.
go and
Let's
put
do
your
that
light on.
first.
Put your light on. It's a great, unbelievable content. Greg putting his light on.
Okay,
We're back. He's
Tyrone
back.
Mings.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's a question that Unai Emery's already been asked. Are the club thinking about extending it? What are the thoughts around it? Is he wanted for the long term? I find it quite sad to think of a time when Tyrone Mings isn't at Aston Villa,
So,
and because he feels very much a part of the furniture now, and I think he really understands the fabric of the club, doesn't he? I think he gets the supporters. Supporters have a mixed opinion of his playing ability, I think, but I think universally he's really well liked. A great ambassador for the club. I think he's still the best defender that Villa have got.
same.
I say that because probably I haven't seen enough of Diego Carlos to know whether he's better than him yet.
Well, he's not played in the league, has he? So you can't judge and say he's
Exactly.
better
So
than
you
Tyrone
just
Mings.
so you
Tyrone Mings
can't
is
say.
proven.
So you can't say. So yeah, I think Villa are worse when he doesn't play. But as far as I'm aware, there are no talks at this point. I mean, what I would say is Villa have been pretty good in keeping the players that they want to keep. In more recent years, okay, they lost Jack Grealish, but maybe a little bit different. But the players they've really wanted to keep, they've managed to tie down to longer term deals. Kept Douglas Luiz at the club where it was at a time where you thought he might be moving on. Emi Martinez signed a long term deal. Matt Cash, a couple of others, I think.
It wasn't that long ago since I felt like Mings got an extension. Concerts had a contract in the last couple of years. McGinn did, yeah.
So look, they've done very well in keeping the players that they want to keep here. So it'll be a conversation that will probably take place maybe in the summer. I think there's no immediate rush. There's another season there. And Mings is no spring chicken anymore. What's he going to be when he leaves his contract? Will he be
31?
31. So I mean, look, still a good age. And you've got to think maybe Tyrone Mings might want another experience or another adventure somewhere else. So it's going to be a conversation that he will have alongside his representatives and the club, possibly in the summer, but then leading into next season. I would like to see him stay for a little bit longer. I think having him at the club is great. If he continues to be Villa's first or second choice defender, great. If he's the third choice defender, even better, because that means that Villa have signed two really good quality centre halves, and it's going to take a lot of money to sign a centre half that's better than him. But that will mean that Villa are in serious business if they're able to find a centre back that's better than Mings, because he's at a pretty good level already, I'd say.
Yeah, I'm going to caveat this by saying everyone knows I absolutely adore Tyrone Mings, absolutely love what he brings to the football club. But the fact that him and Conce are almost still playing, just to play devil's advocate here, that's the third, arguably it's the fourth season in a row now where that's the centre-half partnership. Now, I know Carlos has been injured, he would have played. But that again shows that we've not really moved on, if that makes sense. If you've got the same centre-half partnership for 4 years, like the way you get better is Conce and Mings over time would become third, then fourth centre-backs, because every time you bring a player in, you should be bringing someone in who really is an improvement on what you've already got. And I want Mings to stay anyway, because I think he's Villa's best defender still, the same as you. But over time, as he gets older, a bit like Matip's probably going to be faced with a terrible example because Liverpool are awful at the moment. But Matip has been Liverpool's first choice centre half, but they've got Konate, who they've bought, and Matip will slowly become the third, then the fourth centre half. That's what I'd like Villa to do with Tyrone Mings. He's number one centre half for the next couple of years, in my opinion, because I think he's brilliant. But then over time, you keep him at the club, so you've got that good option when there's an injury, which Villa don't have at the moment, a strong option to bring in. That's how you get better. I'm surprised Villa have let it get. I know you're saying there's no rush, and I understand that. I'm surprised they don't often let it get to 16 months with the contract. I suppose Luiz got to around the same time, didn't he, before he signed a new contract?
Yeah, I don't believe there's any major rush at this point. I think that if you get to the summer and it continues after that, then questions will start to be asked. But they're going to be private conversations between Tyrone, his representatives, and the club, aren't they? We're not going to know too much about it until the time when those conversations take place. And look, I don't know this. I'm just saying, perhaps this might be an option. But as much as Mings loves playing for Aston Villa, and I've interviewed him a few times, and he said that every single time, he might not want to stay as a backup defender if that ever becomes the case. And yeah, just to take your point on Konsa and Mings playing for the last 3 or 4 seasons, Villa did definitely address that, didn't they, in the last window?
Yeah, it's unfortunate, the Carlos stuff.
Just unfortunate that he's been out for so long, because Carlos was highlighted as a player that was going to really push those two and probably would have found his way in.
Yeah, disappointing. I mean, it's been a disastrous season. The first few months of the season were a disaster in a lot of ways, but just kind of a sliding doors moment. That I'd have liked to have seen how Villa's defence would have got on with Diego Carlos, because I don't think he had an easy time his first few games, but I think that's the case with anyone.
Great, was it?
No, that's the case with anyone. I mean, that whole team selection that day was an absolute disgrace from Steven Gerrard. He got an awful lot wrong in that team selection on the first day, and really, I think that game was actually his downfall. In the end, I think that was the start of it really falling apart for him. But Carlos has been a huge miss all season. He would have been that option. I suppose Villa lost Bednarek as well, and didn't really replace him. I know he hadn't really played. Would he say, if we'd have kept him around, would he have played yesterday, do you think, rather than Chambers?
Yeah, I mean, possibly came in for the Fulham game, did he? Yeah, I think he's at a similar. I would say he's at a similar level to Chambers, perhaps, but he's that sort of fourth choice defender who doesn't really improve what the other three. I think Villa do need to be careful, if they don't keep Mings, and again we don't know at this stage. We're just speculating whether he will stay for longer or whether he will go. But I've seen the way Wolves, lost Connor Cody, and he's a similar type of character in terms of the influence that he has on a team when he's playing. And Wolves suffered massively, didn't they, without Cody's presence, and have had to sign now Craig Dawson to try and fill the gap. But they've brought in other defenders previously who hadn't quite
tried to go a different route, didn't they? The younger route.
Yeah, which is fair enough. It's fair enough if you want to be progressive and go on to that next level. That's fine. But sometimes the grass isn't always greener, and you've got to realise the players that you've got actually are better than people that you can bring in.
And I think Villa's record when he doesn't play tells me everything that I need to know about what Tyrone Mings offers Aston Villa. He should be back next week, shouldn't he?
Actually, so he's got a slight thigh strain. Usually, these are the games where these type of injuries that he picks up. He's played through the pain quite a few times, and really battles to get himself out there, and sometimes puts himself, in a position where he's playing with a slight injury, but he's just so desperate to help the team. This one was just a little bit too much for him. So he'll be assessed this week, and hopefully be fit for Arsenal.
By the sounds of it, we need to send you on holiday, to be honest, to get Villa 3 points again. We send you back on. Are you there, right? Are you there on Saturday?
The more I think about it, it's so frustrating, because I just always seem to be talking and writing about defeats, and I go on holiday and I miss the great run of victories.
Won a fair few games when you were in Thailand, mate. It's a bit of correlation here. But you're there on Saturday?
It's the early kick at Villa Park, isn't it?
Yeah, we'll write that one off then. Absolutely nothing going to happen at Villa Park on Saturday. But Greg, I've enjoyed talking to you again. It's good to have 1874 back. Good to catch up with you, and I'm sure Villa will win a game at some point with you there. But yeah, we might be asking this question again next week. Although it's not a great game, is it? Again, although Arsenal have stumbled a little bit in recent weeks, so maybe a good time to play them.
I'd fancy. If I was the Villa team, I'd fancy playing Arsenal more than I'd fancy playing Man City at this point. Yeah, so
especially at home,
I think it might be a bit different. I just hope the fans get behind them. I think they're going to need that, because the atmosphere hasn't been great in the games that I've been to at home, and Villa have lost, which you can understand when fans when the team loses, fans are disappointed, but they're going to need that atmosphere to sort of get behind them a little bit.
Yeah, but brilliant. Well, thanks for chatting to me again, Greg. We'll be back every Monday with the 1874 podcast on the Villa View, so do watch out for that. Subscribe to the channel with your post notifications on, so you know exactly when the video's coming out. And as I mentioned at the top end of the show, we are on Spotify, we are on Apple Podcasts, we should be everywhere now. I believe we're video on Spotify as well now. So if Spotify is the way you ingest your content, then do try and check us out on there as well. Get those numbers up on Spotify. Thanks to Luke Roper for sponsoring us. If you use the code TVV20 at checkout, you'll get 20% off everything good that they have to offer on their store. We have other content through the week. We'll be back with the 2 match preview shows later on in the week. But until now, take care.